This is Brent Allan Winters, and I'm here with Montana Dan. We are the elders at In Church, INNCHURCH, part of Winters Inn of Court, and that's a law school. By the way, you can take those courses, go to and see how it is. You can sign up for some of the courses there. We've probably got a dozen law school courses. Dan, I've tried to teach the courses and at Winters Inn that I should have been taught in law school and wasn't. Some of the courses, though, there, like the course on evidence, I was taught an evidence course in law school. A lot of other things I should have been taught and wasn't, but you only got so much time. Maybe I shouldn't be so hard on them, but I get to do that if I want to, so we're doing that. And we have In Church on Sundays. Go to commonlawyer.com and you can see how to click on a link to. You can see me at In Church, but I can't see you. Montana Dan is there. And we're going through books of the Bible, clause by clause and blow by blow. Right now on Sundays, we're in the book of Exodus, and we are deep into the 10 Davarim, the 10 Commandments, they call them. And I believe, Dan, we're on the 5th commandment now, but you can go back and listen to those on Rumble. Just type in my name, Brent Allan Winters, or Common Lawyer Comments. Go to the website. It'll show you how to click and get to Rumble. Go to commonlawyer.com and go to the media button. Well, Montana Dan and I were talking just before we decided to hit the record button, and we were observing the nature of politics, policy, polis, the law of the city, how it works, as opposed to our law of the land, our common law. And we are always touching here upon the law of the land versus the law of the city, the canon civil laws of the evil empire, the code of Justinian, the Roman Empire, which governs almost every country in the world, and our common law here in America. And I made the comment, and this is a maxim of the law of the city, but also there's a fine line, Dan, between lex talionis, the law, the Roman law, the Babylonian law of retaliation, and justice. And I made this comment, and Dan sees it also. It's an ancient proverb, and it says this: if you're going to shoot, I say ancient, well, they didn't shoot at people in ancient times. Well, they shot arrows, I reckon. Richard the Lionheart was killed by a crossbow, shot him through the neck. That guy didn't do well when they caught him. But if you're gonna shoot at a king, you better not miss. That's pretty much what the proverb says. Well, here we got a man who is our executive officer, and that's what a king is in the old country. That's an old common law word for the executive branch in common law government, the co-equal and separate branch. If you're going to shoot at a king, you better not miss. Well, the evil empire shot at a man who may have been, they didn't know, but he likely might be king, might be the chief executive officer in our common law government. And they missed by about, Dan, would it be accurate to say by about a half an inch?
Yep.
Yeah, and if you hadn't turned...
At the most, an inch.
Yeah, at the most. Between an inch and half an inch.
That's not very much.
No. That'd be, I measure an inch by the first joint in my forefinger. Yeah, no.
My ears are bigger than some, but...
It caught the corner of his ear. And by the way, he will carry a scar there the rest of his life. I know that. Because the cartilage does not mend itself back the way it was. Cartilage won't do that. I know. And if anybody looks at my head, you'll notice one ear is a little bit off compared to the other. We were in a corn crib when I was a boy, the wooden corn crib, and Dad had taken a piece of number 9 or baling wire, I don't remember what it was, and put a stick in it, tied it on both sides of the corn crib, and then wound it tight to pull it in, when you put corn in it, so it push out. And it was empty, and my brother and I were winding that thing and then letting it go, see how fast it would spin. And I was down close to it, and he did that, and whap on my ear. And I didn't think I was going to be able to stand the pain. You get hit in the ear that hard, and I was 6 or 7, probably 7 years old. And ever since then, I've noticed when I look in the mirror to shave that one ear is a little crooked. Well, DJ is going to have, I'm going to look at his ear closer next time, but I imagine, unless he has some surgeons that do plastic surgeon, which that wasn't part of our world back then. I didn't have that done, but it's not much you can notice. I mean, but I notice because I know my ears and they're not exactly the same. Well, DJ is going to have that problem, but they missed. And the results seem to be apparent, and it seems to prove the proverb true. There are a whole lot of folk whose political careers and their heads are on the chopping block. And I heard a fellow say the other day, Dan, that when Obama got into office, he fired everybody right down to the ground. And Republicans are not in the habit of doing that. So I'm going to ask you, Dan, your time in state government, of course, you get to know who the governor is and you get lobbied by all these people. Did you see that kind of firing going on when the new governor got into office? Well, when you were in office, was the governor in your party or in the other party?
The governor was 2 Democrat governors did 2 terms each while I was there, so we were right in the middle of that.
Did they fire the bureaucrats all the way down to the ground and start over and hire new ones?
No, when the parties don't change, they kind of stay the same. More often.
But you were in a legislature that you were likely in the minority, were you?
No, we were. That was 2010, and we were the supermajority in the House.
Oh, so you could overcome the veto of the governor.
Yeah, but we had folks that what do they call them now? The insiders, or right now in Montana we have the out of line 9 in the Senate, and I think they had the log cabin 6 back when I was there, and other terms, rhinos.
Okay.
Some of those folks don't appreciate those terms, but.
Well, I'm glad you told me that. I need to use them more often. You got to keep them picked off, or they might make a mistake. But if they're picked off,
you know what rhino means, right?
Republican in name only, right?
Yep.
Is that what the log cabin 6 were?
Yeah, that was kind of the start of that.
Well, why did they call them the log cabin 6? And I got an idea, because I think I can connect the dots, but I want to hear it from you.
Well, they had a meeting. Supposedly, they had a meeting in somebody's log cabin and did their planning for the session.
Oh, and they were rhinos.
Yep.
There was a group back when I was in that world called the Log Cabin Republicans. Have you heard of them? Well, the Log Cabin Republicans, that was 30-some years ago, were the sodomite Republicans. And they called themselves I don't know why they called themselves that, but they had a lot of money. There weren't a lot of them, but they had a lot of money. And one time I went to a meeting, and when you went to political meetings, they'd ask you to say a few words, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
What would you say?
Back then, I couldn't talk in public, so my brain would shut off and my tongue would swell up. So I didn't do a lot of talking.
What? But you said something, didn't you? Did you?
Yeah, I don't know what it was, but.
Are you saying that you're more talkative in public now than you were back then? It's easier?
Yeah, a lot easier. Yeah.
So, but boy, when you were running for office, when they tapped into you, you had to get up and say something, didn't you?
Yeah, but it was in a pool of sweat.
Oh, okay. Well, did you get butterflies in your stomach?
Yeah.
I had a guy tell me years ago, he said, Brent, you can't get rid of butterflies when you're getting up in front of a crowd. If you're going to have them, you're going to have them. And so since you can't get rid of them, consider this possibility. I said, what is it? Try to get them to fly in formation. If you don't have a little bit of anticipation like that, you're not taking it serious. That's been my observation. And I, like you, when I was in politics, I could get up and say something, but I worried about it a lot. And I wanted to make sure that when I went away from the meeting, people remembered me and didn't remember the other fellows so much. Because you're in competition, try to be remembered. And I wanted people to remember who I was and say something stupid or funny or whatever you could do to get their attention, And I found that humility is the best policy. Don't try to be something you ain't, but I try to get myself out of the way before I start talking. That'd take time, fumbling with my belt and buttoning my coat and trying to relax because it can be pretty brutal. Now, anyway, if you're going to miss, but getting back to the proverb, if you're going to shoot at a king, said the ancients, you better not miss. Now they missed. They came as close as you could get to putting a bullet through the future president's head, but close only counts in hand grenades and horseshoes. And they didn't get him. So what we're watching now is a man, not only has he learned his lessons, having never held any office before, he learned his lessons in this first run as a novice. His presidency was castrated by COVID, and that was their design, I'm sure. And now he's coming back, and he said, I ain't got nothing to lose. Not only that, you tried to put a bullet through my head. Clearly, everybody knows it. I'm going to play rough. You boys are playing rough. I'm going to play rough. And I don't think he would be this way if they hadn't tried to shoot at him. What do you think, Dan?
Well, I'm not sure that this is a fact, but some people think, and I wonder if President Trump in his first term didn't let out enough rope to get nooses around everybody. Of course, he's learned a lot since, but go along with the system just to expose different people. And this time he's playing for real, and I'm sure the remembrance of his ear, I guess it was this ear, getting shot, that probably has an effect on I'm going to get you a little, ramps that going to get you up quite a bit. But I think they had a plan to do this. It seems too organized to be just falling together. There's a lot of planning.
Yeah, a lot of planning. In the midst of all this, I've been driven to go back and observe an assassination of a president within my lifetime and think through it again. And that was the assassination of Jack Kennedy. They called him Jack. There are plenty of reasons to know why they did it. But one thing is for darn sure about that whole thing. Lee Harvey Oswald didn't do it. That's so blatantly, obviously, all the evidence is in. He was a patriotic American, a young boy that wanted to go in the Marine Corps. They took him to intelligence school. They sent him to Russia as a double agent, hoping he would get caught, and he knew that. He was that patriotic. Get caught, and then when he got caught, he'd give him false information. That was the idea. Well, he didn't get caught. They brought him back. He went to Japan and worked there for, of course, the Marine Corps, Department of the Navy. And naval intelligence. Naval intelligence was deeply involved in the whole thing. And there is never, what I mean to say is, in all this that I see in it, you look at all of it along, there's never a lone gunman. Never a lone gunman. There's some patsy they're using, but that's what we see here. And isn't it something that we don't know hardly anything? Haven't heard anything about how that came about. Is it even being investigated how that shooting occurred? Have you heard, Dan?
Well, with the folks President Trump's put in office, I'm sure it's being investigated. But it's probably still all behind the scenes yet.
Well,
there was a lot of stuff from what we saw in the media that just did not make sense.
Oh man, has the media ever told us the truth? I don't know. I was thinking about this, Dan. Back at that time when, in 1963, the 22nd, 23rd of November, we were more unified in what we knew and what we thought in America for this simple reason. There were only 3 media outlets, and of those 3, one of them controlled the other 2, and that was CBS. CBS controlled everything on the television, and that by that time, by 1960, it didn't take long, 80% of Americans had televisions, and the ones that didn't knew what was on television. I've said this before. This is how big television was back then. I remember that little farmhouse I lived in out there on the other side of the creek. We got electricity in 1960. They ran the lines to our house. And immediately, my dad went to the hardware store in town and got a TV set. We wanted one too, you know. If you wanted to watch TV in our neck of the woods, you had to go down to Moonshine Store on Saturday night, and they had a TV down there. You could watch it before that, but who had time for that? Well, people wanted televisions. They had televisions. They were available, and we only knew what Walter Cronkite said. I think I've heard the Evil Empire useful idiots say this, that back then and before, even when there was nothing but radio, and even when there was nothing but newspaper, the Evil Empire could control public opinion a lot easier than they can do it today. I see that now. And we have the internet. Look at me. How I would have never thought I could get on here and people all over the world could watch me. Now, it is watered down because there are hundreds of thousands of people like me, or millions on the internet, like Dan and I. And, but at least it's out there available. That didn't used to be true back in the 60s and 70s and 80s and even into the 90s. So we know something different. People aren't buying the baloney the way they used to. I think a lot do still, Dan. The television is down. Yeah. So are there any television stations, when you ran for office, I'll ask you one more question, we can close this clip out, but when you ran for office, were there any television stations in your legislative district?
Yeah, they were affiliates of NBC, and I think within 100 and some miles there was a Fox station.
Well, did you have you had television stations in Livingston?
No, not in our local town. Bozeman did. That's
so that
40 miles.
That wasn't in your district, though, was it?
Right on the edge.
Well, that's the way it was. When I ran for Congress, didn't have a television station in the district. And so had to go to the edges, So if you spent $500 on a television ad, at least $250 of it went the wrong way, and to people that couldn't vote for you, because it was on the edge of the district. We tried to concentrate on radio. We thought we'd get more bang for our buck radio within the district, because there were a lot of stations in the district and more toward the center, But it's all changed. They say that the last presidential election was the first cyber election. Maybe it was 2020, but just the last two were cyber elections. The internet played a big part, but I'd say no. I'd say when Ron Paul ran, Ron Paul was the first guy to run for president to collect his money, get donations using the internet. He majored on it and he pioneered that method. But of course, now everybody's using it.
Yep.
Yeah, he was able to run because of it. He was shut out everywhere else. Well, I'm trying to think about, and biblically, what would apply to DJ Trump now that they have shot at him. They did miss. And our attitude as well, all the lawlessness that he is now uncovering, his administration, and there'll be more. What is to be our attitude toward that? Are we to be merciful? Are we to overlook it and say, well, you were in, now we're in, we'll just let it go? What should we do, Dan? What would the Bible tell us to do?
Well, God is a God of mercy and grace. But he, through history, especially the Old Testament, there was no, you harm somebody and you're harmed in the same way back. Or if you steal somebody, you bring and get caught, you bring, I think it's 4 back, right?
Yep. Yeah, if you steal something and sell it to somebody else or fence it or transfer it, pay 4-fold. Yeah.
So
well,
there's that. Yeah, you gotta pay for your crime. But God is merciful too. Look at us.
Okay. So yeah, look at us. But it's okay. So God is merciful to us. Should we allow then those that have lied to Congress, lied to the grand jury, lied to enforcement, allow them to just let them go? Hillary Clinton, Comey, the FBI head that lied, that clearly worked against investigations, should we just let them go, or should they suffer the full penalty of the law?
Well, how does their oath of office pertain to that? A lot of them took oath of office.
Good point. Well, they all took an oath of office. You took an oath of office, right?
Yeah.
Okay, two things here.
Appointed people, do most appointed people take an oath too or not?
Oh, yeah.
Elected do.
Well, but appointed as well. Constitution requires. Yeah, Constitution requires it. And when you're going to be sworn in. Okay, did you take an oath when you were sworn in? You were elected?
Yes.
Was it to support and defend the Constitution?
Yep.
Okay, and that's a state office. Now, the Constitution of the United States requires that for a state office. Let me ask you this, Dan. We're talking about the oath, and people make a lot of it. Patriots make a lot of it. You took the oath. Did the oath that you took when you became a state legislator to support and defend our Constitution of the United States against foreign and domestic enemies, did that oath add any new duty to you as an American and as a legislator in Montana?
No, not really, because we're already citizens and we have a duty to our country. But that's stuff I've learned since. So.
And so now let me ask you this. I like this because I'm learning about the mindset of people, and that's what I'm interested in. So you're saying, if I heard you right and understand your comment, you're saying that you took the oath, but you didn't understand the oath the way you do now.
Absolutely.
What is it that you did not understand?
That question would be like the part that I understood was a teeny part of the iceberg sitting above the water and the rest is underneath.
Okay. You think you have the more full orbed understanding at this point? of what the oath is and what it means.
Yeah, I do, but it's still kind of scratching the surface.
Well,
I
let me
think.
ask you this. Okay, you served with a lot of folk that were like-minded with you and right-headed in your opinion, and you served with a lot that were absolutely wacko wrong-headed. Of all of those, let's start with the ones that were on your team, like-minded to you. Do you think that many of them or any of them understood what the oath was and what it meant when they took it?
Um, well, if we're talking about the common law, which you have to understand to even understand what part of the oath you're talking about, or the Constitution, um, I would say probably very few people knew very much. But they were patriotic and conservative Republicans, I guess, would be a thing you could say.
So, okay, do you think that, and speaking of yourself and them, do you think that they understood fully, pretty fully, their duty to support and defend the Constitution, and they had that duty, and they embraced that duty, but they didn't understand what they were doing when they took the oath? It was just it was perfunctory, and they just went through the motions. Maybe thought it was important, but they didn't understand it.
Well, to the depth of the common law, no, but I think some of them had a pretty good understanding of how the Justinian part of what we've been taught, I guess, how that pertains to our Constitution.
Okay.
Does that
So
make sense?
oh yeah, but now think of this. No, yeah, sure. It's always been a crime for centuries to lie to a law enforcement officer. And there didn't used to be as many as there are now, I get it, but it's a crime, a common law to lie to a law enforcement officer. Do you have to take an oath that you won't lie to a law enforcement officer before you can be prosecuted for doing so?
No.
Obviously not. So whether or not they took the oath, whether or not they understood the oath, is not pertinent. Not pertinent to whether or not a person should be punished to the full extent of the law for the crime committed. Now, let me ask this: do we have to be perfect people to want crime to be punished?
No, I don't think so.
You know, everybody in politics, they'll point at them and say, "Well, you want Clinton to be impeached. I saw this happen. You want Clinton to be impeached, but you're guilty of the same thing." I saw people say that and tried to put it in the news and prove that the people that were wanted to impeach Clinton were doing the same thing. As a matter of fact, it got so pronounced that the man who was set to be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives, I saw him make the speech. I had met the guy. He was a congressman from Louisiana, and he made a speech and said, I'm resigning from Congress because I can't go on with this knowing that I've done the same thing that Clinton did. I've had illicit affairs with other females." But did that change his duty? Well, let me give you that. Then that was one congressman. The other congressman, Henry Hyde, they came back at him. He was the leader of the Judiciary Committee. He was at the head of the impeachment, and they put pictures of him on the internet and in the news sitting at a party somewhere with some young gal sitting on his lap in years gone by when he was a state legislator. And he said, "Things that happened in the days of my youth and indiscretion," I remember his words, "have no bearing here. And if you think this is going to stop the impeachment process, think again. It's not. My culpability, my wrongdoing, my sin is not at issue here. Do you think that that was the right thing for him to say, or should he have resigned like the other congressman did? Well, I never thought of it that way, but those two things happened. Leadership, House of Representatives. One resigned, the other didn't. They both got accused of the same thing. What if you had taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the laws of the state and the laws of America? Does that give us the option of resigning because we're sinners?
No, you don't take an unoath ever. I've never heard of that.
You know, I'm glad we're having this discussion, because me just talking about it and then asking you questions, I'm kind of bouncing it off of you, thinking, well, I think I'm right. But then I want to hear somebody else say it. I think that's the case. They took an oath, and the oath did not add any new duty to their responsibilities, but it certainly undergirded and strengthened the duty they already had to enforce law and to see to it that the proper consequences are met out. That's a tough job. I'd say that's a tough job, because you're going to be criticized big time for doing it. But those that had been so ugly and done so many unlawful things, everything from murder to mass murder to how many people died, how many businesses were lost, and people died, I want to stress that, over this COVID baloney. How many families were ruined? Should somebody suffer the consequences of that? No. I'm being objective. I'm on the outside, but I'm saying yes, I think. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I think so. More and more evidence is coming out that it was no more than the common cold or a flu bug, and they just used it for a political gain.
Oh,
and it devastated people and killed loved ones, and just horrific.
One case study I keep saying, and then we'll quit, but let's quit after this. And it's in the Bible, and it had to do, it's in the Old Testament. Yes, that's part of God's word and principles there. He tells us these case studies and these historical narratives to teach us lessons about first principles of law. And some had engaged in idol worship. And God said, I want every man to stand at the door of his tent and gird himself with his sword. Militiaman, and I want every militiaman to kill his brother, his neighbor. In other words, you weren't allowed to go kill somebody you didn't know. You were to kill those, execute those that had committed the heinous sin of idol worship. And if I remember right, I don't remember, the figures were in the thousands, but the Bible, the record, the evidentiary record, as I like to say, I think it was something over 3,000 were killed that day at the command of God. And you weren't allowed, and those men that killed their neighbor and their friend, their family members, they were not perfect people. They were sinners just like everybody else, maybe not guilty of that crime. But there are those crimes down here that God insists upon, and it's not easy. I'm involved, I've been involved, Dan, where I had a lawyer say to me recently, Brent, you got a duty to report this. I've never reported another lawyer to the disciplinary committee, whether you stand to lose your license or be disciplined. I've always thought the best thing to do is to win it fair and square in court. But some of the things that lawyers do is so bad that I have a duty to say something to the disciplinary committee. And the law says that. And a lot of times I don't want to. I want to try to straighten it out some other way. It just seems too extreme. But in the case of DJ Trump, it's my prayer that God's will be done and his justice be executed where he wants it executed. Final comments, Dan?
Yeah, the heinousness of stuff, some of the stuff that's has happened and maybe still going on is we haven't even. I think it's going to be more appalling all the time. Like you were saying earlier, they're just getting to the edge of it.
Yeah. This General Milley that called the general in China and said if Trump gets elected and moves against China, I'll call you and let you know so you can get ready. Have we lost our minds? Otherwise, he went to West Point. Does that mean anything? Answer, no. It means nothing. Absolutely nothing. Dignity and honor are gone. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well, Pam, the new Attorney General, Pam Bondi, she came out and said they're going to go after people that do that. So it's going on now too.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. Just that God's justice will be vindicated, not mine. Well, Montana Dan, thank you very much. Taking a little time to visit with us. There's always plenty to talk about because the laws of nature and the laws of nature's God govern everything. And if we don't pay attention to those simple laws, we will suffer some serious, ugly consequences. You won't live long. You'll get maimed or hurt, or your family be destroyed. The laws of nature and the laws of nature's God. Let's look in this tumultuous time. Let's turn our eyes toward our origins and look there for a sign. The laws of nature unwritten in the nature of God's creation are common law, and the laws of nature's God written in the Bible. These 2 volumes and no others, these 2 volumes and no more. This is Montana Dan and Brent Allan Winters, elders at In Church, www.commonlawyer.com.